The fluorescent lights of Lincoln Memorial Hospital's pediatric wing hummed their usual monotonous tune as Dr. Rebecca Chen made her evening rounds. Outside, the Chicago winter pressed against the windows, transforming the city into a blur of grey slush and amber streetlights. It was nearly 8 o'clock, and most of the day staff had already clocked out, leaving the corridors quieter than usual. Rebecca stopped at room 314, where 8-year-old Maya Torres had been admitted 3 days earlier with a severe asthma attack. The girl's condition had stabilized, but Rebecca wanted to check on her one more time before heading home. She pushed open the door gently, expecting to find Maya asleep. Instead, the child was wide awake, sitting cross-legged on her hospital bed with a notebook balanced on her knees. The television mounted on the wall played some cartoon on mute, but Maya wasn't watching it. Her dark eyes were focused intently on the page before her, a pencil moving rapidly across the paper. "Still awake, Maya?" Rebecca asked softly, approaching the bed. "It's pretty late for homework." Maya looked up, her face brightening despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows under her eyes. "Hi, Dr. Chen. I'm not doing homework. I'm just practicing some math problems." Rebecca smiled, pulling up the vinyl chair beside the bed. She had learned over the past few days that Maya was remarkably bright, the kind of child who asked questions about everything from the medication she was taking to how the oxygen monitor on her finger actually worked. "Math problems. What grade are you in again?" "Third grade," Maya replied, turning the notebook around proudly. "But I like doing harder stuff." Rebecca glanced at the page and felt her smile freeze. The notebook was filled with complex algebraic equations, variables and coefficients, arranged in ways that shouldn't make sense to an 8-year-old. But more than that, there was something familiar about the methodology being used, a particular approach to solving quadratic equations that Rebecca recognized from her own undergraduate studies. "Maya," Rebecca said carefully, her eyes scanning the meticulous work, "who taught you this? This is pretty advanced mathematics." The girl's expression shifted, becoming almost shy. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, a gesture that reminded Rebecca of her own nervous habits when she was younger. "My dad teaches me," Maya said simply. "He's really good at math." Rebecca had met Maya's father briefly during the admission, but only in passing. She remembered a tired-looking man in his early 40s, wearing a maintenance uniform, who had been anxious about his daughter's breathing difficulties. The mother wasn't in the picture, Maya had mentioned during one of their conversations. "Your dad," Rebecca repeated, curiosity piqued. "What does he do for work?" "He's a janitor," Maya said matter-of-factly, without a trace of embarrassment. "He works here, actually, night shift. That's why he can visit me during the day before his shift starts." Rebecca felt a strange tightness in her chest. She looked back at the notebook, at the sophisticated problem-solving strategies, the neat handwriting explaining each step. This wasn't just basic arithmetic or even simple algebra. This was the kind of mathematical thinking she'd expect from a high school student, maybe even a college freshman. "Can you show me how you solve this one?" Rebecca asked, pointing to a particularly complex equation at the bottom of the page. Maya's face lit up. She loved explaining things, Rebecca had noticed. The girl launched into a detailed breakdown of the problem, her small hands gesturing as she talked through each step. She used terms like isolating variables and applying the distributive property with an ease that was almost unsettling. As Maya spoke, Rebecca found herself genuinely impressed. This wasn't rote memorization. The child understood the underlying concepts, could explain why each step worked, not just how to perform it. Someone had taught her not just to solve problems, but to think mathematically. "That's incredible, Maya," Rebecca said when the girl finished. "Your dad must be an excellent teacher." Maya beamed. "He says math is like a language. Once you learn how to speak it, you can say anything you want." Before Rebecca could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. A man in navy blue coveralls stepped into the room, pushing a yellow cleaning cart. He was tall and lean, with weathered hands and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he saw his daughter. "Papa!" Maya called out, careful not to shout too loudly. "Hey, Princessa," the man said softly, his voice carrying a slight accent. He nodded respectfully at Rebecca. "Good evening, Doctor. I'm not interrupting, am I?" "Not at all, Mr. Torres," Rebecca said, standing. She found herself studying him more carefully now. His coveralls were worn but clean, his name tag reading Roberto Torres, Maintenance. There was intelligence in his eyes, she noticed, and a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I just finished talking with Maya about her math homework," Rebecca continued, watching his reaction. "She's quite talented." Roberto's face softened with pride. "She's a smart girl, smarter than her old man, that's for sure." "Papa, you're the smartest," Maya protested. Rebecca saw something flicker across Roberto's face, a brief shadow of something painful. He moved to his daughter's bedside, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "How are you feeling, Mija? Any trouble breathing today?" As Maya updated her father on her condition, Rebecca excused herself, but she couldn't shake the questions forming in her mind. She'd seen that equation methodology before, recognized the elegance of the approach. It reminded her of a professor she'd had in college, a brilliant mathematician who had a particular way of breaking down complex problems. Back at the nurse's station, Rebecca pulled up Maya's file on the computer. Standard admission forms, insurance information, through the hospital's employee family plan, emergency contacts. Nothing unusual. But then she noticed the father's employment history section, partially visible in the administrative notes. Before Chicago, there was a mention of California, Stanford area. Rebecca sat back in her chair, the pieces not quite fitting together. A janitor with advanced mathematical knowledge teaching complex equations to his 8-year-old daughter in a hospital room. There was a story here, one she felt compelled to understand. The next evening, when Rebecca saw Roberto's cart, stationed outside room 314, she made a decision. She had to know more. Rebecca found Roberto Torres in the 5th-floor supply closet, methodically restocking cleaning solutions. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the small space, and the fluorescent light overhead flickered intermittently, casting uneven shadows across the metal shelving units. "Mr. Torres?" Rebecca called from the doorway. "Do you have a moment?" Roberto turned, surprise evident on his face. Doctors didn't usually seek out janitors for conversation. "Of course, Dr. Chen. Is everything okay with Maya?" "Maya's doing well," Rebecca assured him quickly. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else, about the math you've been teaching her." Roberto's expression shifted, becoming guarded. He set down the spray bottles he'd been holding and wiped his hands on his coveralls. "Is there a problem? I'm not doing anything wrong, am I? Just teaching my daughter during visiting hours." "No, nothing wrong at all," Rebecca said, stepping into the closet. "I'm just curious. The methodology you're using, the way you're teaching her to approach problems, it's quite sophisticated. Where did you learn it?" For a long moment, Roberto didn't answer. Outside, they could hear the hospital's ambient sounds. Monitors beeping, distant conversations, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. Finally he sighed, a sound heavy with years of unspoken weight. "I was a professor once," he said quietly. "Mathematics, at Stanford University." Rebecca felt her suspicions confirmed, but the revelation still caught her off guard. Stanford? That's one of the best mathematics departments in the world. "It was," Roberto agreed, a sad smile playing at his lips. "Another lifetime ago." He gestured to a plastic crate, inviting Rebecca to sit. She did, and he settled onto another crate across from her, his tall frame folding awkwardly in the confined space. The flickering light gave the moment an almost confessional quality. "I came to the United States from Mexico when I was 17, Roberto began, his accent becoming slightly more pronounced as he delved into memory. "Full scholarship to UCLA, then graduate school at MIT. By 30, I had my PhD and a tenure-track position at Stanford. I published papers, won some awards, had a beautiful wife, and then Maya came along. What happened? Rebecca asked gently. Roberto's hands clasped together, his knuckles whitening slightly. My wife, Carmen, she got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the aggressive kind. He paused, swallowing hard. The medical bills came fast. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. Experimental treatments, specialists, clinical trials. We tried everything. Rebecca felt a familiar ache in her chest. She'd seen it too many times, families bankrupted by illness, despite having insurance, despite doing everything right. I took a leave from Stanford to care for her, Roberto continued. My research stalled. I missed conferences, couldn't finish papers. When Carmen died, Maya was only 2 years old. She doesn't even remember her mother. His voice cracked slightly. I tried to go back to teaching, but I couldn't focus. The grief was too much. I'd stand in front of my students and forget what I was supposed to be saying. The university was understanding at first, but eventually they let you go, Rebecca finished softly. Roberto nodded. Not immediately. They gave me chances, extensions. But I was drowning. The debt from Carmen's treatment was crushing. I had a 2-year-old to raise alone. I couldn't do research, couldn't publish. In academia, if you're not producing, you're done. By the time I got myself together, my reputation was damaged. No one wanted to hire a mathematician who'd been out of the game for years, who had a gap in his publication record. So you became a janitor, Rebecca said, not as a judgment but as an acknowledgement of the harsh reality. I became a janitor, Roberto confirmed. I needed steady work, health insurance for Maya. The university positions I applied for went nowhere. Community colleges wanted recent teaching experience. I didn't have any more, so I took what I could get. Maintenance work pays the bills, gives us benefits. That's what matters. Rebecca watched him carefully. Even in his coveralls, sitting in a supply closet, there was a dignity to Roberto Torres. But there was also a profound sadness, the kind that came from dreams deferred indefinitely. Does Maya know? She asked. She knows her mother died, that I used to be a teacher. She doesn't know the whole story, not yet. She's 8. She just knows I'm her papa and I work at the hospital. Roberto's expression softened. But I can still teach her, you know. I can still give her what I learned. The debt is almost paid off now. Another year, maybe 2. I'm saving every extra dollar for her education. She's brilliant, Dr. Chen, really brilliant. She could do anything. She certainly seems gifted, Rebecca agreed. The work I saw in her notebook was remarkable. Roberto's face filled with pride. She loves it. Every night after my shift, before she goes to school, we do math together. Weekends, we go to the library and I teach her. She absorbs everything like a sponge. She has what I had at her age, that natural understanding of how numbers work, how patterns emerge. It's a gift. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Roberto's story hanging between them. Rebecca thought about her own path to medicine. How privileged she'd been, supportive parents, no financial disasters, a straight line from high school to medical school. She'd never had to reconstruct her life from rubble. Have you ever thought about going back? Rebecca asked. To academia, I mean. It's been 6 years. Maybe. With what credentials? Roberto interrupted, not unkindly. My last publication was in 2018. I'm not even sure I could do cutting-edge research anymore. The field moves fast. I'm 42 years old, working as a janitor. Who's going to give me a chance now? Rebecca didn't have an answer. She knew he was probably right. Academia could be unforgiving, especially to those who stepped away, regardless of the reasons. For now, I focus on Maya, Roberto said, standing and returning to his work. She's my research project, my greatest achievement. If I can get her through school, get her to college, help her avoid the mistakes I made, that's enough. That has to be enough. As Rebecca left the supply closet, she felt troubled. Here was a brilliant mind, wasted because of circumstance and cruel timing. And yet Roberto seemed resigned to his fate, content to pour all his knowledge into his daughter while his own potential gathered dust. But Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that this story didn't have to end here. As she walked back to the pediatric wing, an idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, might not work at all, but she had to try. 2 weeks after Maya was discharged, Rebecca found herself in the office of Dr. James Morrison, the chief of medicine at Lincoln Memorial Hospital. Morrison was a stern man in his mid-60s, with silver hair and a reputation for running the hospital with precision and little tolerance for nonsense. Rebecca had requested this meeting 3 times before finally getting it scheduled. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said, gesturing to the chair across from his imposing mahogany desk. "You said this was urgent. What's on your mind?" Rebecca had prepared for this moment, rehearsed her words, but now that she was here, she felt her nervousness spike. "It's about one of our maintenance staff, Roberto Torres." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "A janitor. Rebecca, if this is a complaint about cleanliness standards—" "It's not a complaint," Rebecca interrupted, then immediately regretted her tone. "I apologize. What I mean is, I've discovered that Mr. Torres has a rather unique background. He's a former Stanford mathematics professor with a PhD from MIT. That got Morrison's attention. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "Go on." Rebecca explained everything. How she'd discovered Roberto's teaching ability through Maya, their conversation in the supply closet, his tragic story of loss and financial ruin. Morrison listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "What exactly are you proposing?" Morrison asked when she finished. "The hospital has an education partnership with Northwestern University," Rebecca said, pulling out a folder she'd prepared. "We host medical residents, nursing students, various interns. But we also have that struggling community outreach program, the one where we're supposed to offer free STEM tutoring to underprivileged kids in the neighborhood. The program that's been failing because we can't find qualified volunteers," Morrison said dryly. "Exactly. What if Roberto ran it? He's already employed by the hospital. We could restructure his position, maybe make him part-time maintenance and part-time education coordinator. He gets to use his actual skills. The hospital gets a qualified mathematics instructor for free, and the community program finally becomes functional." Morrison was quiet, considering. "It's an interesting idea, but there are complications. HR would have questions about his employment gap. And frankly, a janitor suddenly becoming an educator might raise eyebrows." "He's not suddenly becoming anything," Rebecca countered, her passion building. "He already is an educator. He's been one all along. We'd just be acknowledging it. And as for his gap, he was a caregiver for a terminally ill spouse. That should be commendable, not disqualifying." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "Why does this matter so much to you?" Rebecca paused, gathering her thoughts. "Because I've seen too many people fall through the cracks. In medicine, we talk about treating the whole person, about social determinants of health. Well, what about the social determinants of human potential? Roberto Torres lost everything trying to save his wife's life, and instead of helping him back up, the system just kept him down. His daughter is brilliant, and she's brilliant because he's refused to let his circumstances define him. That deserves recognition. It deserves a second chance." The silence stretched. Outside Morrison's window, Chicago spread out below them, thousands of lives intersecting, each with their own struggles and stories. Finally, Morrison leaned forward. "I'll make some calls. No promises, but I'll see what can be done. If nothing else, maybe we can create a volunteer position for him to start. See how it goes." Rebecca felt hope surge through her chest. "Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Really." 3 weeks later, Rebecca was making her afternoon rounds when she saw a small crowd gathered in the hospital's community room on the first floor. Curious, she approached and peered through the window. Roberto Torres stood at a whiteboard, no longer in coveralls, but in khakis and a button-down shirt. Around him, about 15 children of varying ages sat in a semicircle, their attention completely focused on the mathematical proof he was working through. His movements were confident, his explanations clear and engaging. This was a man in his element, doing what he was born to do. Maya sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Morrison had come through in his way. Roberto's position had been restructured. He still did some maintenance work, but 3 afternoons a week he ran the STEM tutoring program. The hospital had even secured a small grant to pay him slightly more than his janitorial salary. It wasn't a professorship at Stanford, but it was a beginning. "Quite the transformation," a voice said beside Rebecca. She turned to find Dr. Morrison standing there, also observing through the window. "He's exceptional," Rebecca said. "Look at those kids. They're actually engaged." Morrison agreed. "I've also been in contact with some colleagues at Northwestern. Their mathematics department is interested in meeting with him. They have a program for non-traditional academic careers, helping people return to research. No guarantees, but they're willing to evaluate his old work, possibly offer some adjunct teaching." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "You did that? You made a compelling case," Morrison said gruffly. "And you were right. We talk about not wasting resources in healthcare. Well, wasting human potential is the greatest waste of all." He paused. "Also, my daughter is getting her PhD at Northwestern. She's in the mathematics department. I may have mentioned Roberto's story. She may have mentioned it to her advisor. These things happen." Rebecca laughed, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. Don't thank me. You advocated for someone who couldn't advocate for himself. That's what good doctors do." Morrison nodded toward the classroom. "Though I hope this doesn't become a habit. I can't restructure every employee's job." Inside the room, Roberto was now working one-on-one with a student who seemed stuck on a problem. His patience was evident, his explanations tailored to the child's level of understanding. This was more than teaching. It was mentorship, inspiration, the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. Later that evening, as Rebecca was preparing to leave, she saw Maya and Roberto in the hospital cafeteria sharing a late dinner. Maya was chattering excitedly, probably about the tutoring session, and Roberto was listening with that expression of pure parental love that needed no translation. Rebecca thought about all the small moments that had led here, noticing a child's notebook, asking a few questions, refusing to let the story end with resignation. How many other Roberto Torreses were out there, brilliant minds hidden behind circumstances, waiting for someone to see them? As she pushed through the hospital's front doors into the Chicago night, the cold air stinging her face, Rebecca made a promise to herself. She would keep looking, keep asking questions, keep advocating. Because potential didn't expire, dreams didn't have deadlines, and second chances could happen at any age. Behind her, through the hospital's windows, lights blazed against the darkness. Inside, a former professor taught mathematics to children who might otherwise never know the beauty of numbers. Inside, a little girl watched her father reclaim pieces of his lost self. Inside, possibilities multiplied, like the elegant equations Roberto loved so much, each one solving for hope. The formula for redemption, Rebecca had learned, was simple. Recognition plus opportunity equals transformation. And sometimes all it took was someone willing to ask, "Who taught you this?" Because the answer might just change everything.